Hi everyone, it's Greyson and this is Greyson Talks Everything. If you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you're not new and are returning, welcome back. Do be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and also follow me on Instagram to get the latest updates on when videos of mine are coming out, and to just like and admire some fan art of mine that I regularly post on there as well. Some of that should be showing up on the screen right now. Alright, and the link to my Instagram is always in my description, but if you want to know my Instagram tag right now so you can follow me immediately, that should be showing up on the screen right now as well. Alright, let's get into it. So today, I'm going to be talking about absolutely everything you need to know about the lore and the mythology of Hawkeye and like the characters that surround him before you watch the Hawkeye show. And this took so long to edit, and I think it's going to take even longer, so I do apologize if this video is like way longer than others. So yeah, I'm not going to even waste any more time. Let's just get into the video.
So who all is in the main cast? Jeremy Renner returns as Clint, or more specifically the MCU version of Clint. He differs from the comic book character in a couple of key ways. For one, MCU Clint is a devoted husband and a father. Back in the comics, Clint's love life is the butt of many, many jokes, and he's romanced a number of women over the years, even married at least one person, but always screws up his relationships. And as for kids, well, there's an unfortunate story there, but the Clint from the Fraction and Aja comics was in no place to be a father. Curiously though, the trailer hints at MCU Clint occurring some of the comic book character's energy during the 5 years his family ceased to exist. We also expect Clint to reckon with being the remorseless killer for much of that time and discover what it means to reintegrate into the family who experienced none of the turmoil during the blip. Joining him in this adventure is Haley Steinfeld as Kate Bishop. It remains to be seen how she will differ from her comic book counterpart, but we will say this: she is Hawkeye. Like comic book Clint, things never quite go her way, even though she is more successful at adulting. And thanks to a story written by Fraction and drawn by Annie Wu, and expanded upon in a subsequent series by Kelly Thompson and Leonardo Romero, Kate has a wonderful, down-on-her-luck private detective vibe. And with Steinfeld in the part, she might be the most significant addition to the MCU roster from the Disney Plus program so far. Although we freely admit I might be a little biased. The series will also feature Vera Farmiga as Kate's mother, Eleanor, a key clue into Kate's story as her mother is quite significant in her comic book storylines. Ilako Cox as Maya Lopez, the deaf assassin known as Echo, Fra Free as the mercenary Kazi, also known as the Clown, and Tony Dalton as Jack Duquesne, a man with key ties to Clint's past. Zane McLaren will be playing Maya's father, William Lopez, and Brian Darcy James is in an undisclosed role. Ava Russo, Ben Sakamoto, and Cade Woodard also return as Clint's children, and perhaps most importantly, a golden retriever named Jolt takes on the iconic role of Lucky the Pizza Dog. Hopes are already riding high that an episode will adapt the issue of Hawkeye, which is seen from Lucky's point of view. Also, Florence Pugh is expected to turn up at some point as Yelena Belova. If you recall her final scene in Black Widow, Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, points her in Clint's direction as the person most responsible for Natasha's death. We expect that confrontation will be crucial to the story in some capacity and, hopefully, lead to at least one reveal about the Contessa's plans. Hawkeye's head writer is Jonathan Igla, a veteran of Bridgerton and Sorry for Your Loss. Other writers include Katie Mathewson and Tanner Bean. On the directing side, episodes will be helmed by Amber Finelson and Katie Elwood, who go by the directing name Bert and Birdie, and Comrade detectives Reese Thomas, a group of talent who suggest Hawkeye will be one of the lighter Marvel shows, which is keeping in with the Fraction written comic book. The source material still hit on some serious topics though, and saw Clint's hearing loss take on a new prominence. Set photos from the series suggest MCU Clint will lose some of his hearing during the program as well, and a few shots up from the trailer reveal what appears to be a hearing aid in Clint's ear. Based on the trailer, it's clear the story will be set during the 2023 holidays, a handful of months after the events of Avengers Endgame. Clint brings his children to New York for this special trip because, as he puts it, he's making up for lost time. So clearly both he and the kids are still adjusting to the reality of the blip and the 5 years Thanos stole from them. But soon, Clint learns someone else has become Ronin, the costume persona he adopted during those 5 years of darkness. As glimpsed in Endgame, Ronin was a ruthless and relentless scourge to the criminal underworld. His campaign was so intense, in fact, that few of the surviving Avengers believed Natasha Romanoff could bring him in from the cold. And clearly, some of that past will catch up with him, even if the person in the Ronin costume is Kate Bishop, the self-possessed world's greatest archer. Of course, she has problems of her own, otherwise, why dress up as Ronin in the first place? Based on the Young Avengers and Hawkeye comics, we expect some of those problems will be very close to home. Also, according to comments made by Renner and Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige ahead of the show's production, Clint will mentor Kate in some capacity. The meeting of Hawkeyes, meanwhile, will lead to plenty of action, some silliness, and we hope the best look at Clint's life outside of avenging yet we've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Of course, no Hawkeye series based on the Fraction and Aja comic book will be complete without New York, and the trailer makes it clear most of the series will stick to the 5 boroughs. For close watchers of the MCU's ever-evolving landscape, getting a look at the city ahead of Spider-Man No Way Home will be of particular importance. For one thing, there will be Easter eggs like Rogers the Musical on Broadway, but we imagine the series will also contain a few echoes to Endgame's nearly deserted New York and offer some details about how this desolated New York reshaped itself into the one glimpse in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Spider-Man Far From Home. As it happens, there is room here to make pointed references to the Daily Bugle and the Global Repatriation Council. Also, the glimpses of Manhattan in the Hawkeye trailer sure remind us of the same island featured in the Netflix Marvel shows. Hope springs eternal that it may mean the return of Wilson Fisk or Jessica Jones, even if it's just as mentioned characters somewhere along the way. Of course, only rumors suggest such a thing occurring. Superhero TV shows and movies set during the holiday season are pretty rare beasts. Sure, we've had the occasional vaguely holiday-themed episode of an Arrowverse show from time to time, since those shows, at least pre-pandemic, tended to operate more or less in the real time with their broadcast schedules, and of course, both Iron Man 3, Batman Returns, and Shazam were set around the Christmas season. But it's rare that they really revel in the atmosphere of the season. That's going to change with Marvel's new Hawkeye series coming to Disney Plus in November, which according to executive producer Tim Trans, is grounded and funny, packed to the brim with Christmas spirit. Fans had already suspected that Hawkeye could be set around the holidays when the first official image from the series, featuring Haley Steinfeld as aspiring superheroic archer Kate Bishop, hanging out with former Avenger Clint Barton, played by Jeremy Renner. That image, seen right here, included some prominently placed Christmas lights among the various trick arrows and targets scattered around the basement. Tran's remarks come from the latest issue of TV Guide, in which she sheds a little light on both the setting and flavor of the next MCU live-action show. While I've already glimpsed the MCU at the Christmas time in Iron Man 3, or we've all have, this will be the first holiday season we spend there after the events of Avengers Endgame. In other words, it will be the first time we see how citizens of the MCU are enjoying the holidays after they've reunited with many relatives who have been snapped away by Thanos at the climax of Avengers Infinity War. New York City has in many ways recuperated and continued thriving, but the same can't be said for its citizens, Tran told TV Guide. We'll leave any and current real-world parallels there to your imagination. Tran also spoke to how Kate ends up in the orbit of Clint, saying that she has put in years of training specifically so that she could become a superhero. Kate is looking for ways to implement those skills, Tran says, and that's when she runs into Clint, who has no clue who she is and doesn't really understand her obsession with him. Hawkeye is taking at least some of its inspiration from the celebrated Matt Fraction and David Aja comics that kicked off in 2012. Those stories are an absolute riot, and fans of them may note that the friendship between Kate and Clint isn't exactly without its hurdles. It's easy to imagine Kate becoming quickly disillusioned with an exhausted Clint who might just be hoping to put the chaotic events of the last 5 years behind him so he can spend time with the family that had been taken away from him. When Marvel unveiled the countdown clock for the release of the Hawkeye Disney Plus show, the excitement for the Avenging Archers TV debut grew and grew. And with the release of the show on the horizon, now is a great time to revisit the source material that the Disney Plus show will be drawing inspiration from. Matt Fraction's Hawkeye series of 2012 to 2015. Fraction's run has been critically praised thanks to fantastic artwork from David Aja and a collection of other artists. The series gives a starring role to the young Avenger Kate Bishop, who also operates under the codename of Hawkeye alongside Barton. With guest appearances from fan favorites such as Captain America, Black Widow, and Mockingbird, the comic series fantastically depicts a turf war Barton mistakenly stumbles into, making him the prime enemy of the Russian mafia. It showcases Hawkeye's many relationships, the iconic Lucky the Pizza Dog, who is showing up in the show, and a constant and elaborate color coordination, and it delves into Clint's inferiority complex and highlights the underlying cowboy themes while not taking itself too seriously and keeping the story simple. Hopefully, we at the very least get a crumb of all that in the upcoming Hawkeye show. Like Black Widow, Hawkeye is a superhero without powers, which means his strength comes from his skill. And before Black Widow released this summer, we knew very little about Natasha Romanoff's origin story. And the same goes for Clint Barton. But now that Hawkeye is one of Marvel's highly anticipated upcoming shows, we're hoping we might learn a bit about how Clint, played by Jeremy Renner, becomes Hawkeye. Hawkeye's origin story in the Marvel Comics is a bit different than in the MCU, and it's likely that Hawkeye will pull inspiration from both. We don't know too much about what will go down in Hawkeye, but I have some educated guesses based on what we know about his comic book origin story, as well as the Easter eggs in the MCU has fed us so far. In the comics, although he bears some similarities to Black Widow, their origin stories also share some notable differences. The biggest similarity worth noting, however, is how they both were formed from villains to heroes. In addition, they had childhoods ripe with abuse and absent parents, which is how they end up starting their heroic careers by working for criminals. Clint Barton grows up working for his father's butcher shop in Waverly, Iowa, with his older brother Barney. However, their father was an abusive alcoholic, and he gets into a fatal car accident with the boy's mother while driving drunk, and Clint and Barney are left to fend for themselves. After stints in foster homes, they join a traveling circus, and Clint trains first with the swordsman, who specializes in tricks with blades, and who also appears in Matt Fraction's Hawkeye run, and is also later married to Avenger and Guardians of the Galaxy member, Mantis. However, Clint learns that the swordsman is embezzling from the circus, and the two fight until Clint is left for dead as the swordsman flees. Clint recovers and picks up training with the circus's resident archer, Trickshot. And after more criminal activity, Clint severs ties with Trickshot and his brother. However, Clint continues to excel at archery and becomes a carnival attraction dubbed Hawkeye, also known as the world's greatest marksman. And after seeing Iron Man in action, Clint is inspired to don his own superhero getup and fight crime, but is quickly mistaken by authorities as a thief. And after this, he meets Black Widow in a by hapstance, and the two partner up in service of the Soviet Russia. Although Clint and Natasha form a romantic relationship in the comics and not in the MCU, he's unhappy fighting for the bad guys, and he approaches the Avengers, sharing that he wants to reform, and Iron Man sponsors his membership as a part of the team. In the MCU, we don't know if Clint was ever in the circus, but what we do know is that he never finishes high school. And we also know that in the MCU, he's handpicked by Fury, as opposed to the comics, which approaches the Avengers himself. In the movies, Hawkeye is a day one Avenger, although he's probably the Avenger we know least about. And much like Black Widow, Hawkeye will likely give us flashbacks to go into what made Hawkeye who he is, and bring us up to date on his character's future after Avengers Endgame. From what we already know, the new series will likely focus on Clint passing down his Hawkeye torch to young Avenger Kate Bishop, played by Haley Steinfeld. Kate Bishop took over the Hawkeye codename from Clint Barton in Marvel Comics, and the Master Marksman will officially pass on his superhero mantle to Kate in the Disney Plus series, Hawkeye. But how did Kate acquire the Hawkeye moniker in the comics to begin with? Catherine Bishop, who went by Kate from a young age, was first introduced in Young Avengers issue 1 in 2005. She was the youngest in her family and was often overcome with loneliness. Kate's father was busy with his work and his mother was estranged from the family before she tragically passed away. Despite Kate's feeling of isolation growing up, she always had an urge to help others. Kate grew up as a child of wealth in Manhattan, and unfortunately, that wealth couldn't protect her from being attacked in Central Park. To help overcome this trauma of that incident, she began training in martial arts, fencing, and archery. This training helped her restore her self-confidence and eventually inspired her to take up the superheroic lifestyle. Kate saw her opportunity after a chance run-in with the fledgling Young Avengers. She donned a costume inspired by both Hawkeye and Mockingbird's uniforms and forced her way into the team's ranks. It wasn't long before she proved herself more and more worthy to carry the name Hawkeye. Like Clint Barton, Kate Bishop has no superhuman abilities, and she's just a skilled fighter and an incredible marksman who fearlessly charges into battle against much stronger foes. Also like Clint, Kate is very skilled with a bow and arrow. She even has her own arsenal of trick arrows supplied by Black Panther in the comics. And she draws inspiration from other key figures in Clint's life, wielding a pair of twin staves like Mockingbird and Black Widow, and even sometimes a sword like Clint's old mentor, Swordsman. Kate's prominence in the Marvel Comics has grown in recent years, and she became the third character to portray Hawkeye in the Marvel Universe, following Clint and Wyatt McDonald. Kate primarily worked alongside the Young Avengers, but she also went on to spend a lot of time as Clint's partner. Clint was the first one to show Kate that anyone had the potential to be a superhero, and Kate also taught Clint quite a few life lessons during their time working together. And despite not having powers and focusing as much on detective work as superhero missions, Kate Bishop has developed a few intensive rivalries during her brief career. Her own father, Derek Bishop, was revealed to be a powerful crime lord with ties to other big-name Marvel villains, and one of those villains, Madame Mask, has essentially been developed into Kate's arch-nemesis over the years. The two have a bitter rivalry going on, even though they share a lot in common as daughters of wealthy, evil fathers. Kate has also tussled with some of the biggest villains in the Marvel Universe thanks to her membership in the Young Avengers. She's been involved in more than one battle between the Kree and Skrull empires, and she and her teammates even fought Doctor Doom in a story called Avengers: The Children's Crusade. On the other end of the spectrum, Kate and Clint have both fought against the New York branch of the Russian mob, or the Tracksuit Draculas as Clint refers to them. Kate will finally be making her MCU debut in the Disney Plus series Hawkeye, with Haley Steinfeld playing the character alongside Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye. Initially, fans speculated that Clint's own daughter, Lila, would become the MCU's version of Kate Bishop, creating a father-daughter dynamic that doesn't exist in the comics. However, despite Avengers Endgame showing Clint training Lila in the art of archery, it's now clear that Kate will be introduced as a completely separate character. Marvel previously indicated the series will take place during the 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame, showing more of Clint's time as Ronin. But now it looks like it does in fact take place after Endgame, like WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki did before it. Whether he likes it or not, Clint must school Kate in the ways of being a superhero archer. Will the mantle of Hawkeye pass from one generation to the next? We'll find out. While Kate Bishop counts a number of A-list Avengers as friends and comrades, her most important ally is undoubtedly Lucky the Pizza Dog. Like Scooby-Doo, Lucky is blessed with unusually keen canine intelligence and a love of human junk food, hence the name Pizza Dog. The critically acclaimed Hawkeye issue 11 even presented a superhero adventure entirely from Lucky's non-verbal point of view. Lucky originally took a shine to Clint Barton, even attacking the Russian mobsters threatening Clint's apartment building, and he was severely beaten by the mobsters and left for dead. But Clint's quick intervention saved Lucky's life. Lucky became a fixture in Clint's loft, though it wasn't long before he took an even bigger liking to Kate. When the two Hawkeyes parted on unhappy terms, Lucky headed west with Kate Bishop. They've been pretty much inseparable ever since, and Lucky will appear in the Hawkeye show, which is very exciting. The first trailer for Marvel's Hawkeye Disney Plus show confirms the appearance of the Tracksuit Draculas, and here's what fans need to know about the upcoming villains. The Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4 series brings Jeremy Renner back to star as Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, and it will finally give the sharpshooter an adventure of his own. But Hawkeye will also introduce Kate Bishop, and the show isn't adapting a major comic book event like Secret Invasion, but it is clearly taking heavy inspiration from Matt Fraction's acclaimed Hawkeye run. During his time with the character, Fraction did some great work with Hawkeye and showed him as a street-level average hero just trying to do his best. Hawkeye's story included him living in an apartment building and standing up to the landlord, Ivan Banionis, and the leader of the local New York Mafia. Barton eventually forces Ivan to sell the building to him, even though Ivan had another deal lined up. This is the beginning of a war between Clint and Ivan's Mafia, which includes massive car chases, hired assassins, and so much more. After set photos teased the inclusion of Ivan and the Tracksuit Draculas, the first Hawkeye trailer offered the first official look at their involvement. The brief look at Ivan and his bros in the Hawkeye trailer is still enough to tease a similar role for them in the series. It showed Clint tied up by the Tracksuit Draculas and surrounded by the gang, and Kate comes crashing through the ceiling window to try and save him. This doesn't explain exactly why the Draculas are after Clint, and the MCU could update the reasoning for this grudge against Hawkeye. Instead of trying to feud between Ivan and Clint to the apartment for Clint's affair with Ivan's wife, Hawkeye could tie it back to his days as Ronin and terrorizing criminals in New York. Ivan and the Tracksuit Draculas don't pose too big of a threat to Clint at first in the comics, but his continued interference in their plans made them have it out for Hawkeye. The Tracksuit Draculas originally planned on selling the apartment building to help create a shopping mall, and when this became impossible after Hawkeye forcefully bought the building, they had to use different tactics. This resulted in the Tracksuit Draculas ordering a hit on Hawkeye. They tried and hired an assassin known as the Clown, played by Fra Free, who will appear in the Hawkeye TV series. In the comics, the Clown works with Ivan and the Tracksuit Draculas to raid the apartment building in hopes of killing Clint Barton. They did not, however, account for Kate Bishop showing up and helping. The raid did not work as a result, with Clint and Kate working together to take down the Clown and Ivan. Since so many elements from Matt Fraction's Hawkeye run will be in the show, it seems that it's set up to faithfully adapt the story. The Hawkeye trailer even teased the New York car chase between Clint and the Tracksuit Draculas, although that was tied to Clint's relationship with Cherry in the comics. Clint is a happily married man in Hawkeye, so him sleeping with Ivan's wife wouldn't fly with the MCU's version of the character. The Dracula's abuse of Lucky the Pizza Dog has even been teased already too. Marvel has barely shown any of the Tracksuit Draculas, but they should get a sizable role in Hawkeye. The first trailer for Disney Plus's Hawkeye series caught viewers up to what Clint Barton has been doing post-Blip. It also introduced a number of fan-favorite comic book characters, including the Tracksuit Draculas and Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop. However, one character who has been confirmed for the series but didn't appear in the trailer may end up being Hawkeye's most dangerous villain yet, Kazimierz Kazimierczak, better known as the Clown. The Clown first appeared in Matt Fraction and David Aja's Hawkeye comic run, and after seeing his friend die in a freak accident as a child, Kazimierczak takes up the identity of the Clown and becomes an incredibly dangerous mercenary working for the Tracksuit Draculas. He crosses paths with Clint Barton after he is hired to kill him by several mob bosses, including the Tracksuit Dracula's leader, who formerly owned the building that Hawkeye currently lives in and protects. Clown and the Tracksuit Dracula's first move is to intimidate Barton by killing his neighbor, Grills, and after this he reveals Clint's dark past before attacking him and his brother Barney. The sadistic hitman proves to be too much for the Barton brothers and leaves them both with serious injuries. Clint is defeated after the Clown jams 2 arrows into his ears, and Barney is shot and paralyzed. After this, Kazimierczak arranges for the Tracksuit Dracula's leader to return to New York, and he joins forces with them to take back Hawkeye's building. Unfortunately for the criminals, they are defeated when the building's tenants fight back, and Clown is beaten by Clint and Kate Bishop. The villain has not popped up since, although he has become a fan-favorite character in the years since he last appeared. Considering his clown makeup and his vicious temperament, it is easy to draw comparisons between Kazimierczak and DC Comics' Joker, but the characters are actually quite different. And while the Joker is bombastic and unpredictable, Clown is methodical and precise, planning his crimes out carefully and taking his time to ensure they are executed properly. A character named Kazi, who will reportedly be played by Fra Free, has been confirmed to appear in the Hawkeye series. Given the similarities in their names, it is very likely that this character will end up being revealed as Kazimierczak and will serve as a major villain in the Disney Plus series. This is only strengthened by Barton wearing what appears to be a hearing aid in the show's first trailer, suggesting that he will suffer an injury to his ears similar to the one inflicted on him by the Clown in the comics. If this does end up happening, it will cement the Clown as one of the few villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to permanently injure a superhero. What makes the Clown so dangerous is his lifelong connection to the tracksuit two Draculas, as well as his utter lack of empathy. He is perfectly willing to kill as many innocent people as it takes to get to Hawkeye, even children, as shown by his murder of girls and his attempt to kill Kate Bishop. The Hawkeyes will certainly have their hands full with dealing with Zemirak, and as his deadly calm nature combined with his unwielding dedication to his mission could make him one of the MCU's most deadly and memorable villains. Disney Plus's Hawkeye series is set to introduce several comic book characters into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's now being reported that the show's supporting cast will include Tony Dalton as Jack Duquesne, a character who's more than likely the MCU version of Jacques Duquesne, aka Swordsman, up from the Marvel Comics. Created by Don Heck and Stan Lee in 1965, Swordsman served as both Avengers' enemy and ally over the years, depending on the situation. What he lacks in superpowers he makes up for his Olympic-level athleticism and mastery of bladed weapons, particularly swords, hence the name. He's also known for being extremely cunning and tends to prioritize his own interests above everyone else's, which is why he frequently switches sides between Earth's mightiest heroes and/or their enemies. In the comics, Duquesne is a Frenchman who grew up in the Southeast Asian nation of Hong Kong as a young man and joined the Hong Kongese natives in their rebellion against their European rulers. After learning the rebels' leader had killed his father, however, Duquesne grew disillusioned and didn't resurface until years later, when he used his swordplay skills to secure a job at the Carson Carnival of Traveling Wonders. It was during this time he was working for the carnival that Duquesne met Barton, who was then a young boy who was a runaway, and became his mentor by teaching him how to wield bladed weaponry. Duquesne and Barton's relationship came to a tragic end when Barton learned his mentor had robbed the carnival's playmaster to cover his gambling debts and tried to turn him in. Duquesne nearly killed Barton while making his escape and went to use his sword skills to fashion his new identity as the supervillain Swordsman. Their dark past was a source of tension between Duquesne and Barton after that, and when the latter became Hawkeye, he fought against allowing Swordsman to join the Avengers. The pair more or less made their peace with one another over the time and even worked together on occasion, if somewhat begrudgingly. Duquesne's backstory and relationship with Barton will surely be reimagined for the MCU, especially because Dalton is actually 4 years younger than Renner, so he's not likely to be Hawkeye's mentor. Barton's past overall will be explored in the show, and it's likely the series will carry over the amnesty between the characters from the comics, perhaps by making Duquesne someone Barton worked with and was betrayed by during his time as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. In fact, Dalton has already shown a knack for bringing shifty types to life, having played the baddie Lalo Slomaca on Better Call Saul since season 4. Duquesne may end up being portrayed as a relatively charming anti-hero, acting as a foil to Barton and the relationship he develops with Bishop while preparing her to become Hawkeye. Black Widow's post-credit scenes begin with the moment fans have been hoping to see ever since Natasha's death was rather quickly passed over in Avengers Endgame. Yelena takes a trip with her dog to a cemetery in America's Midwest, where Alexia and Melina raised her and Natasha as children. The movie then shows the tombstone of Natasha, which reads that she was a sister, daughter, and Avenger. What starts as a potential heartfelt scene of Yelena paying respects to her fallen sister is cut short when Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, appears. Yelena mentions that Valentina isn't supposed to contact her during her off time and jokes that she wants a raise. However, Valentina gives Yelena her next mission, which confirms that she'll return in Hawkeye. Before Black Widow's release in this post-credit scene, Yelena's involvement in Hawkeye was only rumored. Marvel Studios then confirmed multiple cast members for the series, but Florence Pugh was not among them. She now officially joins the cast, led by Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye and Haley Steinfeld's Kate Bishop. Yelena's role in Hawkeye is plainly set up to be a villain in the eyes of Clint Barton. MCU fans already know that Valentina is not the most trustworthy nor heroic person after her brief appearance in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This automatically makes Yelena working for Valentina a potentially worrying indication of what she's been up to since Black Widow's ending and where her future is heading. But she's now been hired by Valentina to take out Hawkeye and get revenge on the person sort of responsible for Natasha Romanoff's death. This clearly sets up Yelena to be on a mission to take out Clint when she arrives in Hawkeye, and whether or not she's successful is up for debate, but there's no doubt that Clint won't walk into a friendship with Natasha's sister. The trailer for Marvel series Hawkeye has the avenging Archer in the midst of Christmas time chaos, tonally evocative of Die Hard, except, in the streets of New York City and not the high-tech LA skyscraper. However, while the show's long-teased idea of a reluctant Clint Barton, played by Jeremy Renner, taking on a scrappy protege Kate Bishop, played by Haley Steinfeld, comes to fruition before our eyes, the trailer also quickly flashes to another potentially important character, Echo, a deadly assassin who happens to have direct connections to Daredevil and Kingpin. Consequently, we could finally have a Marvel Cinematic Universe bridge to the forgotten street-level Netflix shows. Echo, as played by debuting actress Alaqua Cox, appears in the Hawkeye trailer in a red-lit flash that lasts for a single second before things move along. However, don't let the briefness of that moment belie her prospective importance on the MCU. The character, otherwise known as Maya Lopez, is prominent in the pages of Marvel Comics, standing distinctly as one of the few handful of deaf heroes in the medium, and eventually as a key member of the New Avengers. However, Echo's menacing mug in the trailer makes her ominous player hiding in the periphery amidst the main twosome's tussle with the Tracksuit Mafia. So why would a character like Echo be involved in these events? Well, the answer is auspicious to fans of Netflix Marvel shows. A creation of writer David Mack and artist Joe Quesada, Echo debuted in Daredevil Volume 2, Issue 9, which hit back in May of 1999. She was depicted as a foster daughter of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, a relationship that came about when Fisk killed her real father, although granted a final wish to care for his young daughter, whose face bore his bloody handprint. Interestingly, the drawback of Maya's deafness was offset by prodigious learning disabilities, or more or less learning abilities, similar to that of Taskmaster, making her able to mimic, or echo if you will, the most complex of skills, complemented by exceptional reflexes. Thus, with the Kingpin as her father figure, said abilities were channeled into making her his deadliest enforcer, and upon her debut, was dispatched to deal with Fisk's longtime rival, Daredevil, and with the deaf assassin serving as a poetically parallel opponent to the blind hero. Touting the Echo name, showcasing a face painted with a white hand, allegedly recollecting her father's bloody handprint, Maya's efforts to end Daredevil would, in a manner that deadly women like Elektra and Typhoid Mary know too well, end up taking up a romantic turn, except with Matt Murdock initially unaware that he was her crimson-clad quarry. Consequently, upon learning his secret identity, Echo scraps with the man without fear would eventually lead to a major change in perspective on her de facto father, Kingpin, culminating in a confrontation that leads to the crime boss's downfall. At least one of them, anyway. Subsequently, Maya was left aimless in the initial post-Kingpin pre-New Avengers days. This led her to briefly operate as a vigilante, becoming the first of several iterations of Ronin, a Japanese for a masterless samurai. A mantle that, as the trailer indicates, is pertinent to Hawkeye in its own right. While we won't get ahead of ourselves speculating on the ways that Echo's rather circuitous comic book trajectory, as she joined with the Phoenix Force at one point as well, could be mirrored in live action on Hawkeye, it's worth mentioning that the NYC set gangster activity at the center of the show's plot would likely blip the radar of the biggest gangster of them all, Wilson Kingpin Fisk. Such a notion would indicate that Echo is ominously hiding in the shadows, watching as events unfold, perhaps on behalf of her adopted father, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Indeed, this would validate the long-running rumor that Vincent D'Onofrio will reprise his magnificently layered antagonistic role as Kingpin, or at least a version of him, in the MCU. While said return was once speculated for the movie we now know as Spider-Man No Way Home, it could still bear consequences for the December scheduled threequel, albeit indirectly. After all, Daredevil himself, played by Charlie Cox, is strongly rumored to be set for an appearance alongside Tom Holland's Wallcrawler for what is believed to be a cameo as Matt Murdock in his capacity as a lawyer. Consequently, while the chances of Daredevil showing up on Hawkeye currently seem, to put it generously, small, the prospect of Kingpin appearance, or him appearing at all, by contrast, is quite high. While such an appearance, especially given its super secretive nature, would likely be relegated to a quick cameo of some kind, it would nevertheless be a profoundly consequential moment for the MCU, since it would be the first time that a Netflix character, even a version of one, would be properly christened into the MCU. While Netflix Marvel shows Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, The Punisher, and The Defenders contemporaneously touted their status as MCU adjacent, even to the point of including random Easter eggs referencing MCU events like the Battle of New York, the favor was never returned by the MCU movies or shows in any form whatsoever. Thus, an appearance by D'Onofrio's Kingpin, regardless of how brief, would be the long-sought acknowledgement of Daredevil and, by proxy, the other inhabitants of Netflix's proverbial small-screen island of misfits Marvel heroes. On another interesting note, potentially pertaining to Echo, the Hawkeye trailer is teeming with Ronin material, indicating that Clint's post-snap blood-spilling family-grieving vigilante spree, as we saw in Avengers Endgame, has now yielded new consequences with the arrival of a copycat. While he's now living content with his blip-returned family, his sense of responsibility compels him to briefly put them aside to deal with the new Ronin. While we eventually see Clint unmask the new Ronin, revealing a starstruck Kate Bishop, the trailer might be playing some sleight of hand with the new vigilante's identity. That's because a whopping 8 characters have assumed the guise of Ronin in the comics, and none of them were Kate Bishop. Moreover, with Echo, the first one to don the frequently passed mantle in the comics, mysteriously manifesting on the series, it could be the case that Maya is the female Ronin in question, and that Kate was simply masquerading in the costume with some other agenda in mind. Thusly, Maya's prospective turn as Ronin would be the bleak start of a character arc that could culminate with a heroic turn for Echo spin-off series that is reportedly in development right now.
So that's it. That is absolutely everything you need to know before you watch the Hawkeye TV show on Disney Plus on Wednesday. What did you think? What did you think of this video? Again, I'm so sorry that this video was so long. That's totally on me. A lot of stuff to unpack there. But yeah, are you excited for the Hawkeye show? What are you most excited to see? Share all your thoughts down below in the comment section. And also, again, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to the channel, and again, like and smash that subscribe button, and do all that fun stuff. Alright, bye everyone.